I think it's interesting that this was something written kind of piecemeal over time, but you pulled it together into a hilarious collection of stories. I mean, honestly, it took me longer to do that book, not just because I had to kind of play with a character voice over time, but because it was funny. I mean, I would start and stop, and I would catch some of the references. It was almost like growing up in Tennessee, I'd heard and seen some of these people. I don't know if it's a universal Southern thing, but there was a lot of things I could relate to, and I found myself shaking my head and laughing and then getting back into it. Except for ex-spouses and mother-in-laws, rats are the most maligned creatures on earth. You dirty rat, he ratted to the cops, or you rat fink, etc. You've heard the hurtful words. I often wonder why our Creator put rats on earth. I suppose to test some folks and give others sport. They drive otherwise devout church-going folks to the brink of sin. Take Mama, for example. There's never been a more saintly woman than she. After hearing a sermon on cussing, she corrected me when I said, "Golly, that's the same as using God's name in vain," she said. I really didn't mind, since I preferred saying "all shucks" anyway. Yet Satan, masquerading as a small mouse that was leaving droppings on her kitchen counter, tested Mama's religion severely. Late one evening, my 6-year-old daughter Shannon was spending the night with Mama when she heard talking coming from the kitchen. She got out of bed and tiptoed to the door to see what was going on. Mama was bent over a mouse trap, loading it with a hunk of cheese and mumbling to herself, "I'll catch you this time, you little I won't repeat the word. Shannon was shocked. "Meemaw!" Startled, Mama spun around. "Youngin', you get back in bed where you belong." I'm happy to report that Mama caught the small mouse and saved her religion from further erosion. Now, you wrote this over a period of how many years?
Well, I was writing 2 columns a month, and I think there's 128 stories in Cornbread Chronicles. That's not all of them. Those are just the stories that the lady pulled out that she liked. So I was writing, 24 a year? I guess maybe 10 years. Over a period of 10 years, I had written the stories that went in Cornbread Chronicles.
Now, I know you take some creative license, and you may embellish a few points in some of the stories, just for the sake of humor. But the stories about you growing up in the South, I mean, are all those basically true?
Yeah. So somebody asked me one time, says, "How do you make up all those stories?" I said, "I don't make them up." I said, "Those things happened to me, and they are continuing to happen." You just sort of relax about life, look around, you listen to people, what they're saying, and you realize that everybody is just sort of goofballing through life. We pretend that we're not, but we were back over the cat, and we do things that we don't like people to know about, but you sit around, you talk to people, find out that we're all in the same boat. We all make those silly mistakes. And I would sit down and I would write something, Troy, and I'd say, "No, wait a minute, I can't tell this. I can't tell this. This is too embarrassing. Like going to see the psychiatrist." So then I would ask myself, well, then did it happen? And is it true? And if I answered, yes, it happened, and yes, it's true, then I would write it.
A few weeks later, I heard the dreaded knock on my door. I opened it, and there stood a short fellow with a serious look on his face, holding a clipboard. "I'm the state bee inspector," he said, and flashed his credentials. He had come to inspect my bees. I pointed to the hive among the trees. "Mister, those bees are mean. I'd sure be careful if I were you." He chuckled. "Mr. Barksdale, I've been dealing with bees all my life. After all, that's my business." I peeked through the blinds and watched the inspector as he waddled on down the driveway. When he reached the hive, he began slapping at his head. He stood his ground for a few seconds, then turned and hightailed it up the driveway to the house, swatting and fighting bees. I opened the door and let him inside. He was huffing and puffing. "Man, you're right, those bees are mean," he said. "Yep, that's what I told you." I never heard any more from the state about the bees. When I moved to Legtown, one of my neighbors was a city slicker who decided to return to the land. He had chickens, ducks, guineas, goats, cows, horses, but he didn't have any bees. I gave him my bees. He was appreciative. "Think nothing of it," I said. "I'm happy to do this favor for you." Now, I don't know who has those outlaw bees now or how many times they've been passed around. My advice is if someone offers to give you a hive of bees, tell them to buzz off.
If they can't see the truth in it, and they think it's made up, they're not going to connect with it. Now, I did have, when I first got started, I wrote a story about, being country. I don't forget what it was, but exactly what it was. But a lady called the editor of the paper, and he called me, and he said, "Hey, I've heard from one of your readers." I said, "Oh, yeah, really? What did she say?" She said it was the sickest thing she had ever read in her life. And I said, "Well, I'd like to meet that lady because she's probably the only one that even understands my personality." I have no idea who she was, and then try to track her down. But I thought that was pretty hilarious, you know. And, but they read it. Yeah. She may have thought it was, my sense of humor was sick, but at least she was reading.
Well, the one thing you're not is politically correct. That's obvious.